Today is Tuesday, October the 2nd. This is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. And good news, NAFTA is officially dead. The Donald Trump and his staff have renegotiated a contract with Canada and with Mexico, and so he has kept another campaign promise. Last night I was listening to, again, the American Center for Law and Justice, ACLJ, starring Jay Sekulow. And I had noted the other day that he had gotten it wrong. He said that when he said that Grassley put off the vote in order to allow Ms. Ford to come and testify before the Senate committee. And I said that that was wrong, that basically what the left was doing was trying to get the Republicans to prove a negative, that they were challenging not the politics of Mr. Kavanaugh, but challenging metaphysical reality itself. Well, it seems that Mr. Sekulow is getting the message, because last night he's changing his tune and saying that it was wrong for Mr. Grassley to go ahead and put this off as long as he did, although the committee did vote out Mr. Kavanaugh, so now it's up to the full Senate. But at least he's starting to come around and understand why it was a bad idea. At first he thought it was a fairly shrewd political move, and then after seeing what's been happening lately, all the wacko accusations that are coming out, he gets it finally. He starts to understand that one of the consequences of when you're giving in to people that are trying to defy metaphysical reality is that you get a lot more of the same. You get more people that want the Senate to do the same thing, to prove a negative. And so he realizes, and I think the people in the Senate are starting to get it as well, because the Senate majority leader has said that is going to hold a vote on the Kavanaugh for the hearing for the full Senate this week, period. And that's that. So, and then the FBI investigation continues, and supposedly the President Trump has given the okay to expand the scope of the investigation by the FBI. Whatever, we will see how it goes. So there is, and on a little bit on Rush Limbaugh this morning, he was reporting that there is. It appears that a lot of the races around the country are tightening, and not in favor of the Democrats, but in favor of Republicans. Republicans that were once fairly well behind are now closing the gap. So that will be interesting to see. We will see how that goes. One last thing I did want to mention before I speak about what it is I'm going to have on the show, or what's coming up next, is again about, well, never mind. I'll get to that later. Right now, what I'm going to do after we come back is read from the Ayn Rand lexicon. Then I'm going to go ahead and finish up Ayn Rand's 1963 interview with Playboy, and then go ahead and read Philosophy According to House and Philosophy According to, or Breaking Bad and Philosophy. And so that when we come back. And thank you very much. Welcome back. And the Ayn Rand lexicon, chock full of concepts. And concepts and abstractions are important. Our society, it has a tendency to go the other direction, influenced by the left. The left wants everybody to communicate the old-fashioned way, the troglodyte way, the caveman way, which was by telling stories and painting verbal pictures. Very often, if you ask somebody a simple question, instead of getting a simple answer, you end up getting a story. Somebody tells you a story. Well, I went here and this happened and he said this and she said that, kind of thing. Instead of just simply conceptualizing and abstracting the information to make it more concise and make it easier to communicate to somebody else. And today our entry is charity. My views on charity are very simple. I do not consider it a major virtue. And, above all, I do not consider it a moral duty. There's nothing wrong with helping other people if and when they are worthy of the help and you can afford to help them. I regard charity as a marginal issue. What I am fighting is the idea that charity is a moral duty and a primary virtue. The fact that a man has no claim on others, i.e. that it is not their moral duty to help him and that he cannot demand their help as his right, does not preclude or prohibit goodwill among men, nor does it make it immoral to offer to accept voluntary non-sacrificial assistance. It is altruism that has corrupted and perverted human benevolence by regarding the giver as an object of immolation and the receiver as a helplessly miserable object of pity who holds a mortgage on the lives of others, a doctrine which is extremely offensive to both parties, leaving men no choice but the roles of sacrificial victim or moral cannibal. To view the question in its proper perspective, one must begin by rejecting altruism's terms and all of its ugly emotional aftertaste. Then take a fresh look at human relationships. It is morally proper to accept help when it is offered, not as a moral duty, but as an act of goodwill and generosity. When the giver can afford it, i.e., when it does not involve self-sacrifice on his part, and when it is offered in response to the receiver's virtues, not in response to his flaws, weaknesses, or moral failures, and not on the ground of his need as such. A little interjection here is that one of the things I like to do is because I'm thinking as I'm reading all this about panhandlers, and so I prefer to give to panhandlers, and I'm trying to get to the point where I am not giving to panhandlers that just stick their hand out. There's so many that do that so many that can't even be bothered to stand up while they're begging for money. They're sitting down. They can't be bothered to speak. They use signs, crudely drawn signs instead. But anyways, giving, I get myself in the habit of giving to people that are doing something. I ran across somebody the other day that was doing some juggling. Boom. I made sure he got some money. If somebody is playing a musical instrument, boom, they can get some money. And that reciting poetry. There's so many things these folks can do. Sell matchsticks, recite poetry, read a book out loud as people walk by. Provide some source of entertainment or amusement. Do something, so as Ayn Rand says, so that I can give for the person's virtues, not to reinforce the flaws, weaknesses, or moral failures of that particular individual. Back to the Ayn Rand lexicon. The proper method of judging when or whether one should help another person is by reference to one's own rational self-interest and one's own hierarchy of values. The time, money, or effort one gives or the risk one takes should be proportionate to the value of the person in relation to one's own happiness. To illustrate this on the altruist's favorite example, the issue of saving a drowning person. If the person to be saved is a stranger, it is morally proper to save him only when the danger to one's own life is minimal. When the danger is great, it would be immoral to attempt it. Only a lack of self-esteem could permit one to value one's life no higher than that of any random stranger. And conversely, if one is drowning, one cannot expect a stranger to risk his life for one's sake. Remembering that one's life cannot be as valuable to him as his own. If the person to be saved is not a stranger, then the risk one should be willing to take is greater in proportion to the greatness of that person's value to oneself. If it is the man or woman one loves, then one can be willing to give one's own life to save him or her, for the selfish reason that life without the loved person could be unbearable. The small minority of adults who are unable rather than unwilling to work have to rely on voluntary charity. Misfortune is not a claim to slave labor. There's no such thing as the right to consume. control, and destroy those without whom one would be able to survive. And that wraps up that particular entry, and next time it will be choreographer. So when I come back, I'm going to read from philosophy, Breaking Bad and philosophy. Thank you very much. Breaking Bad and philosophy. Better living through chemistry. And so what we're at here is going through all of Walt's kills and the ethics of these kills and whether or not he was morally justified in killing the people that he killed. So Gale is the next one. Walt's moral guilt falls to a new low with the death of Gale. Although Jesse is in direct proximate cause of Gale's death, Walt is clearly morally responsible. Weighing the degrees of moral blame for Gale's death becomes complicated due to the critical role of choice in assigning moral responsibility and deciphering who has what choices in the final actions undertaken. Gale is nearly innocent in the scheme of all the characters in Breaking Bad. He's a gentle geek with ideological justifications for making quality meth. He has a pure and simple love for chemistry, appears not to be driven by greed or pride, and has genuine reverence and affection for Walt. He knows what he's doing is illegal, but justifies it based upon his libertarian ideals, the fact that meth addicts will find meth anyway, and at least he can provide them with chemically pure meth. He seems driven to do his job merely for the creativity it allows, his love of chemistry, and his need for a job. He also respects Walt and strives for his approval. But Gale is being used by Gus to glean Walt's knowledge, so that Walt can be eliminated. Walt realizes that Gale's education in his methods means that Walt will become disposable, and knows full well that it's either him or Gale. But Walt doesn't pull the trigger. Instead, he sends Jesse to do so. Although Walt himself has prevented Jesse from killing Gus, which would have also, presumably had Jesse had even a chance of success, prevented the necessity to kill. Jesse's put in the position of either killing Gale or allowing Walt's death. Walt has, of course, put Jesse in this and every other horrible position requiring equally horrid decisions, but Gale's death will be Jesse's first murder. It's a turning point both for Walt and for Jesse. A nearly complete innocent is shot point blank in cold blood to save the life of a cancer-stricken, significantly less than innocent Walt. Moreover, Walt doesn't commit the murder but uses Jesse, who until then has no blood on his hands. Is Jesse a murderer? Is Walt, despite his a lack of direct involvement in Gale's killing? Jesse is now guilty of murder, both morally and legally. He pulled the trigger that killed Gale and moreover had a choice, although he acted under the knowledge that failing to kill Walt would result in Walt's murder. He had no legal justification to kill Gale, as Gale wasn't the threat. He may have had passive moral responsibility for Walt's death had he failed to kill Gale, but he had no active responsibility to kill an innocent Gale in order to save Walt's life. Killing Mike would have been more justifiable, certainly. Killing Gus, absolutely. But Walt's ordering Jesse to kill Gale under the threat of Walt's own demise due to Walt's own actions makes Walt complicit and morally guilty for Gale's death, perhaps as much as if he had himself pulled the trigger. Mitigating this a bit is the fact that Walt's survival helped ensure Jesse's survival and was, after all, a better plan with a greater chance of success than Jesse's. But Walt was the driving force, who gave the order and upon whose fate Jesse's decision hinged, a fact that was entirely avoidable had Walt only helped Jesse carry out this act of, perhaps justifiable, vengeance against Gus. Or, heaven forbid, had Walt not decided to enter the meth business in the first place. There we go. He finally gets to it. The other thing of this is that he says he's asking questions. He's asking stupid questions. It used to be in our society where there were stupid questions. Well, there still are, but it's just nobody calls them stupid questions anymore. Now you can ask anything, no matter how stupid it is, and expect to get away with it. And but anyways, one question is Walt morally responsible? Is Jesse morally responsible? Yes. And we know this by the evidence of our senses. We do not have to analyze this. This requires no analysis. What when you watch the show and you see what happens, see the guy Gale answers the door, and Jesse shoots him in the chest after he answers the door. Okay, bang. And when you see that, there's no doubt, again, by the evidence of your senses, that what he did was repugnant, morally repugnant. And the fact that Walt put Jesse up to it makes him also morally repugnant. And that is the morally repugnant thing. He did a morally repugnant thing. We know that. Asking somebody to murder somebody else is repugnant. We don't need analysis. We don't have to go through a big machinations. All of this analyzing or overanalyzing is thanks to a punk named Descartes, Rene Descartes, who was, for whatever reason, I guess just he has, on a whim, decided that he was going to take 2,000 years of intellectual history and throw it in the garbage and start over. And what an idiot. I mean, that's the best way to put it. What a freaking idiot. Throws 2,000, and he set a trend. After that, other so-called philosophers, Nietzsche and Hegel and Kant et al., started doing the same thing. They just throw their predecessors' work in the garbage and start all over again and ask questions that had already been answered, or asking questions that were self-evident. Okay, and that's the definition of stupid questions. You're asking a question that's already been answered. You're asking a question that we already know the answer to by the evidence of our senses. We don't need to analyze this. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's not necessary. Okay? So very often when people are asking you questions, one of the best responses is to ask them a question back. You mean you don't know? Well, gee, was Jesse culpable here? Gee, you don't know? When are you going to figure it out? Okay, so don't get suckered into that one, into trying to analyze something that's providing an answer to a question that's already been answered, so to speak. So next time, the hit on the Walt hit parade is Gus, Tyrus, and Hector Salamanca. Now, when I come back, I'm going to read from. What am I going to read from? Let's see what we got here. Oh, House. That's right. House and Philosophy. Everybody Lies. Thank you very much. Welcome back. This is House and Philosophy. Everybody Lies. So, and I also want to say from my last episode, or last section that where I was talking about Breaking Bad, again, he would have been better off analyzing the entire show in terms of its morality, and making note of the fact that there's no good characters. The guy that he says is the truly innocent, there's nothing innocent about him. Where do you get the idea that he's innocent? His death is, he brings about his own death. Yes, he was murdered. Yes, that's wrong, but he was complicit himself. Gale, the guy that gets shot by Jesse, he brings it about himself by getting involved in the meth business. If you want to put yourself in a position where your life is constantly at risk, get in the drug business. Become an illegal a drug dealer, somebody who deals in illegal drugs. Okay, and then don't be surprised when you get shot. Okay, so, but anyhow, every character in that series, the only one that escapes any guilt or moral responsibility is the baby. Walt and his wife have a small child that's about 6 months old. And, of course, since it's a baby, it, doesn't have any moral responsibility, isn't morally repugnant. Everybody else in this series is ugly. This is a series of ugly people doing ugly things for ugly reasons. Even the people that are supposed to be good guys in this, the DEA agents, are ugly people. And so he would have been better off writing a book that analyzes the show Breaking Bad from that perspective. So, but anyways, back to House. And House, what we're doing here is analyzing him and more or less psychologically, but they've been philosophical about it, comparing him to Nietzsche's works and Nietzsche's men with big chests and will to power and things of that nature. So we're at the section called pain, because House is a doctor that's in pain. He had an infarction in his thigh that helped to kill the muscle or part of the muscle, leaving him in constant pain and having to use a cane. So, pain. In writing about pain, George Simmel says, quote, "This is one of the fundamental themes of the history of the human soul. The essential elevation of our being is effected through pain. Nietzsche transfers this connection beyond the individual to mankind. Only discipline attained by great pain has brought forth all elevation of humanity," unquote. In a poetic sentence, Nietzsche's Zarathustra says, quote, "One must still have chaos within oneself to give birth to a dancing star," unquote. House's chaos seems to find its roots in his very real pain, which, according to at least one placebo-contrived episode, may be psychosomatic. The pain, whatever its cause, may be the detour directing House on the higher road to accomplishment via focus and intensity. Nietzsche's earliest works, The Birth of Tragedy out of the Spirit of Music and Philosophy in the Tragic Age of the Greeks, radically reinterpret standard contemporary views regarding Greek philosophy and art. As M.S. Silk and J.P. Stern say, the suffering hero of great tragedy, Oedipus or Prometheus, is the original model for Nietzsche's Superman. These mythological characters messed with the gods, and because of their act, they pay heavily and with physical pain. With House, we encounter some obvious similarities with these Nietzschean models. House's achievements are remarkable, if not mythological, and while they are for the good of others, House disregards standards of common courtesy and rules that have historically regulated the institution of medicine. House's pain, like that of Oedipus and Prometheus, engages our empathy and may be connected with his ability to solve problems unsolvable by most others, his elevation. It would be easy to say that House's acerbic personality, quite unlike the Overman, is an outgrowth of his pain, and his abuse of others is a mode of relief. But what would a protagonist be without a flaw to move him just a little bit toward the role of underdog when his behavior seems to flow in the opposite direction? So, Inheriting the Earth is the next section we'll be covering next time. And again, with House is the guy here that in this particular series, it wasn't like Breaking Bad, where all of the characters were just bad people, bad, wretched people. This was one in which you had basically the star, the central character was a rather wretched individual, but redeeming himself by saving lives. So, and when I come back, a couple of jokes from the New York City Cab Driver's Joke Book. Thank you very much. Welcome back. A lion with a bad hangover is walking through the jungle early one morning. He is in extremely grouchy mood, roaring at anyone who gets in his way. Suddenly, he comes upon a giraffe. "You know," says the lion to the giraffe, "you are really an ugly animal. Your neck is all out of proportion to your body. Everybody has to strain his neck to talk to you, and you have those big ugly spots all over. Boy, you are awful to look at." The giraffe says to the lion, "Gee, I never thought of it that way, but you know, you're right. I really am an eyesore. Look, I'm sorry. I'll move out of your way so you won't have to look at me anymore." With that, the giraffe shuffles away, totally depressed. Now the lion feels a little bit better, but he's still feeling grumpy. And soon he comes upon a hippopotamus. "Now you," says the lion to the hippo, "are really ugly. I mean, you have those big ugly teeth, you're overweight, and you have skin that is way too big for your body. And your skin is all cracked. Phew, are you grotesque." The hippopotamus says, "Golly, I really can't argue with you. You're right. I'm sorry, I have to spoil your view. I'll just push on so I won't cause you any more unpleasantness." And the hippopotamus walks slowly away, extremely depressed. Now the lion feels quite a bit better. He's still a little testy, though, so in a few minutes, when he sees a frog, he says to the frog, "Of all the animals in the jungle, you look the worst. Man, you are disgusting. Your eyes bug out, they have a gross slimy film all over them, and your skin is all covered with warts. Man, you are revolting." The frog looks at him and whines, "Fuck you. I've been sick." And with that, we come to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.